もう、いずくだけで再生数1万は増やしてるわね。お母さん怖くて見れんわ。
Hey, we have to talk. Five years ago, I made a video talking about the decline in physical releases of games and how that was scary to me and what that could mean for the release of games going forward in seemingly all digital age. And it's crazy in how in 5 short years, so much has happened, and a lot of that has either come true or been even worse than I expected. The Wii U and 3DS eShops are now closed. The PlayStation Network store is going to be closing any minute now. According to a recent study done by the Video Game History Foundation, 13% of retro video games, and they consider that as any game released before the year 2010, are playable to us. 13%! Do you see how bad that is? Like, they consider the rest of the 87% of them critically endangered, with them mainly being available only on the second-hand market since they've, of course, been out of print and are no longer in most retailers.
Every Game Boy game, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance title produced physically. And now we'll show you all the ones that are commercially available today.
So much stuff the companies make, they don't let you buy, which is absolutely ridiculous to me.
Most of the games of what I have could be considered under that 87%. Remakes and re-releases of games are increasingly more important, especially in the last couple of console generations. It's awesome seeing games like Super Mario RPG being more easily accessible to people with all these cool visuals and all the updated UI, and it's just so exciting. But you gotta remember,
they're always gonna want to hold the option to put these things out on sale at a time that is beneficial for them, versus like, oh yeah, every library in America can share. Every library in America can share Super Mario RPG, the original. It's like, oh, well, no, we're making a big new remake. We need that to be the version that people buy and get excited for, because that needs to be the only thing.
Yeah, because these business decisions are motivating, you know, the preservation decisions versus it being like, let's preserve this like art form.
And on the other hand, the recently released Metro Prime Remaster and the Final Fantasy VII Remake Trilogy bring these amazing classic titles to modern platforms with modern spins and updates and quality of life features. That's great, but keep in mind, in my opinion, they should be viewed as also like companion pieces to the original. Final Fantasy VII in particular is a great companion piece to the remake.
Why did you choose to do emulation as opposed to getting the pixel remasters on Switch and stuff like that?
Well, even though the pixel remaster is pretty good, I like to see the process of the game fully evolve into how it is now. Pixel remaster is really good. I really like what they did with the style of it, keeping it with the original. But what I like about the originals is that they were the way that they were. Like Final Fantasy I was all pixelated and stuff, but had this charm to it that like more recent or updated games don't really bring out to tables. Same goes with 2 and 3. And like seeing the evolution of it is just amazing. Like seeing Final Fantasy 1 from how it started, to seeing 6 and seeing how the style looks so much grander, to 7 where it becomes fully 3D, to 8 where they look more humanized, to 9 when they look cartoony. I just like seeing the series evolve into the way that it is.
But the one thing to note though, especially remakes as big and ambitious as the Final Fantasy VII Remake Trilogy and the 4 Resident Evil remakes we got over the last few years, they've changed so much that they should be considered just different titles than the original game. So in other words, both should coexist, and the original should be preserved as much as possible and be put on modern platforms again and again and again. Also, it will help people who play the remakes understand the source material the original is based on. Video game history has been a special interest of mine for as long as I can remember. I've always loved learning about the betas of games and the development and just seeing all this old tech, collecting the old tech, and talking about it. And to see just like all these digital stores crumbling and learning more about what's going on, especially recently, is heartbreaking. And my hope with this video is to share with you what I found and my thoughts about the current state of video game preservation and how I believe we should improve it for the future. So without further ado, let's begin.
The f***ing Wii U 3DS eShop thing. Holy crap. That's just, hey everybody, download these games you purchased or else you'll lose them forever.
A frustrating thing about closing down a digital storefront is that digital storefronts are supposed to, they serve a great purpose. They solve a big problem. The idea of like, you want to play a game, but the only way to play it is to like track down the old hardware and get an old copy. Like, it's very archaic at this point. It's prohibitive when it comes to cost. It's getting more and more difficult to find the old hardware and those old games.
If you want to easily open up your Wii U and 3DS, play the game, and just get it, that's gone. Unless if you already got the games beforehand like I did. And even so, I could only get what I could get. No individual person, unless if you're the completionist, can get every single game on those systems. So there is going to be something you're missing out on, which is why him donating those systems to the Video Game History Foundation is so important, is because more than just him, like more people are going to be able to see the entire library and understand and be able to see on the actual hardware what these games are like. The good news is though, companies like Capcom have been taking their games, which are originally digital exclusive, mainly Ace Attorney 5 and 6, and putting them on modern platforms next year is awesome. Even if you got those before, that's okay, because if you weren't able to get those before, there's a second chance. Porting games is very nice, especially nowadays where if they were only exclusive to those systems at the time, they can be brought over again. But not every game is lucky. As I mentioned before, there are a bunch of exclusives we're still missing, and because of just the different licensing agreements and the development time and all these costs to like even just port a game one-to-one.
They have DS games on the Wii U. It can emulate DS games. So like, there's a very good chance that Nintendo will never have another dual screen system because it's just a thing. It's created a lot of problems.
Unless if the Switch 2 somehow has a second screen accessory, or if in itself has a second screen, we may never see those games again. Another couple platforms where games have been frequently delisted and continue to be delisted are the App Store and Google Play Store. Mobile games are a whole different beast compared to traditional video games on consoles and PC. However, they still continue to have a massive audience despite the drastic game design shift that has been made to them since their popularity started booming around a decade ago. Candy Crush, Temple Run, Subway Surfers, Jetpack Joyride. These were some of the pioneers to help mobile games become the juggernaut that they are in the gaming industry. Although some of them have gotten physical releases, like Plants vs. Zombies on the DS, or Cut the Rope on 3DS, or Angry Birds on Xbox and Wii U, not every game does, and because most of them are digital only, they are constantly being threatened to be removed at any time.
One thing that I heard about while making this video that I forgot to mention was mobile games. Apparently the original Angry Birds got delisted from the App Store and in favor of the sequel, which is free, but the original's gone. And when you think about it, thousands and thousands of games could easily be removed, or probably have been removed from the App Store since then. Do you think these games, despite being just for phones and tablets, do you think they're also important to be preserved?
Personally, yeah, I do think it's very important to also preserve those as well. I was a kid who grew up with a few mobile games. Cut the Rope was one of the ones I was obsessed with, and also, I forget what it's called, but it was the one by Disney about the alligator who needed their water, like, rerouted.
Was it like, Where's My Water?
Is that what it's called? It might be
so,
Where's
yeah.
My Water. But, no, those were essentially part of my childhood just as much as, like, my DS was. It's pretty important that those stay there, too.
So, what is being done currently to preserve these games? Well, I have some good news. There are a few museums out there that have been starting to preserve video games and their legacy and their impact in pop culture. One in particular I wanted to mention is the Strong Museum of Play in Rochester, New York. This museum, for those of you who don't know, is an excellent interactive museum that allows you to view the history of all forms of play, not just video games. But their video game section in particular is really fascinating to me with their Video Game Hall of Fame. People are able to get a chance to partake in the original experience of playing these games on the older hardware, see what it was like, which I think is an important part of preservation that doesn't get talked about enough. And for researching this video, I found out that on their website, for free, you can view an easily accessible video game history timeline, where you can break down every single decade from the 70s to today and look at some of the core gaming events to help shape gaming into the mainstream audience. Whether if it's Pong being released in the arcades in the 1970s, or Wii Sports helping older people and casual audiences get into gaming, or Animal Crossing New Horizons helping millions of people connect during a pandemic for the last few years. It's not a comprehensive list, but it's an excellent start, and I really hope we see this more. There are a lot of people, especially in younger generations, younger than me, who may not know what a warp pipe from Mario is, or how Nintendo got to where they are today, or why Sega only publishes games and doesn't make their own consoles anymore. Timelines like these are really important, as you'll see later, and hopefully we see more of them in the future. The Video Game History Foundation also preserves the context within video games with the documents, concept art, and outside reference materials like marketing used to promote the game. It gives people an understanding of what the culture was at the time the games were released. Like, if you see like old GameCube ads, you can see how weird Nintendo was trying to be to differentiate from the crowd, or the Wii era when they softened up a bit and try to appeal to a wider audience, the Blue Ocean strategy, if you will. Now, if you take a game like Super Mario Bros. On the NES, right? Okay, I'm gonna give you the cartridge. Okay, cool. Oh wow, Mario. I like Mario. What's this duck hunt? I don't care. If you take this game cartridge on its own, it's really cool, but it's like, you need to give them the controller, the console, the TV that the game used to be played on. And then they get an understanding of like what restrictions developers had at the time when making the games, or how games used to play, or the game design, or how difficult they used to be. Stuff like that. And these two examples I mentioned before do an awesome job at that, and it just shows preserving games is more than just about preserving the games themselves, but the context surrounding them. And one thing that I've always loved about that is like learning about the betas of games, like going through that process of seeing how games evolve and turn out to be what they want to be. Other than like Unseen 64, Beta 64, and a couple other channels, I've noticed like there isn't a lot of source material out there that's easily available to be like, oh, I wonder what the beta of this game was like. Some games, like I've noticed, you can see that and find that easier, but others it's like, I want to know the beta of like Pikmin 4, and that's, as far as my knowledge, like Cutting Floor, yeah, but like it's pretty difficult. So do you believe that we should like improve like the preservation efforts for like the dev cycles of games as well?
Absolutely, because that stuff is so interesting to look at. One tricky part of it is, as Gabe Newell said,
the process that you go through to create something that's really good involves going through a lot of bad, right? And it's pretty hard to then say, I'm now going to, in addition to publishing the final piece, I'm going to show you all of the edits that my editor made. The reality is, if our customers think something is interesting, and any fan who's willing to spend that much time organizing information, discovering information around our games, that's a pretty strong signal that they're trying to tell us this is actually really valuable.
I do think it deserves to be preserved, especially in terms of like sometimes on like betas of games just have so much stuff that didn't make it into the final version.
That's why when you play a retro game on Nintendo Switch Online, or an emulator using like an Xbox controller, that's why a part of you goes, is this right? Is this how the game's supposed to be played? Because the games originally weren't designed that way, you know? They were designed with like an NES controller, or an SNES controller, or just something different than what you're using. And that's what's nice about the classic consoles Nintendo did a few years ago that I feel like isn't really mentioned enough, because they are bundled with the actual controllers themselves, and they look similar to the consoles, and they have an easy to use menu and stuff like that. Nintendo did their best to try to recreate that experience as best they could of playing on an actual NES or SNES, while having like the modern convenience of like easy plug and play, HDMI, high quality sprites, and stuff like that. And they come with the CRT and 4x3 filters, so you can try to emulate those games as best you can. And Nintendo Switch Online, you got the similar controllers made for those and Nintendo 64, so you can slightly recreate that feel. That's great. It's like visiting a reggae museum, right? When I went to the Statue of Liberty in New York City recently, not only was I fascinated to see the actual statue in person, but I learned so much more about it and I got a newfound appreciation after going inside the museum. Because it had all these design documents, old models of what the statue could have looked like and was looking like before they decided on a final design, and the meaning and its symbolism. It made me appreciate this as a symbol for not just New York City or the United States, but the world in general. That's why I love Atari 50 so much. They didn't just go, okay, here you go, we're gonna take all these ROMs from 50 years, put them on the Switch, $50. Nope, they went above and beyond, putting all these like video interviews with like some of the original creators and like modern game developers, like the creator of Psychonauts. They had like unreleased prototypes of all these cool games, high quality scans of like the marketing and posters. Like, oh my god, I'm telling you, if they did like a Nintendo museum or whatever, they put all the classic titles from Switch Online, Virtual Console, all that stuff, and bundle it into one package, not only would they make so much money and it would be so successful, but it would teach newer generations of players a deep, rich history of the philosophy of these games and the creators and why these series are so important. And it would help people understand who, if the Switch is their first console, they can understand why or how Nintendo became a juggernaut today over the past few decades. Now, I feel like we can't mention physical games of preservation without mentioning limited run games. So they're kind of like the Criterion Collection, from what I understand, where they take old, like indie games, order games that they port and stuff like that, and they make physical versions of what would normally be digital-only games, mainly indie games like Shantae, River City Girls. Scott Pilgrim was a big one. I know that was originally only digital, got delisted, and they brought it back, like on Switch and PlayStation, physically, and it was readily available at like Best Buy, and on the website, of course, and stuff like that. So it's a niche, but it's like they still have a market to like try to make physical copies that are feature complete and don't need any future updates. Yeah, I mean, I still like them, you know, they're still fine, but compared to years ago, I can kind of understand the controversy that's been surrounding them.
They say they're trying to preserve video games in a physical state so that when, say, Nintendo shuts down the Switch eShop, it's going to happen one day, you will still be able to play some Switch games that weren't AAA enough to be released on a cartridge. They were originally formed to sell their own games from Mighty Rabbit Studios. Limited Run 001 is their game, Breach and Clear.
Like, if you take, like, Doom Eternal, for example, right? Awesome game. I've been waiting 3 years to get it physically because, oh, Switch version got canceled physically. That's really sad. Okay, bummer. I'll just wait, you know. I'll get it if it happens. Limited Run Games was like, all right, I got you, fam. I'm gonna put this on the cartridge, physical copy. It's so cool. No DLC. And I'm like, are you serious? Now, I can understand, okay, it's DLC, you gotta buy it separately, but Xenoblade Chronicles 2, which released like, what, 4 or 5 years prior, they put that on a separate cartridge and game case and everything. And Nintendo did that. So the fact that Limited Run didn't do that with Doom is just weird. I know it's just like a small example and everything, but that just goes to show that you can argue physical isn't always preservation. You gotta keep in mind, like, especially on like PlayStation 5 and the new Xbox consoles and a little bit on Switch, like most games, you're gonna get downloads, you're gonna get updates, you're gonna get DLC, all the cosmetics, and like all that stuff. If you buy that same game 10, 20, 30 years from now, and those shops are like long gone, they're not re-released, it's only on, let's say, the Switch. That means that you're not gonna have a complete experience, which is just super frustrating. Now, back to Limited Run real quick. Their physical store in North Carolina is great, and I like that they've been trying to sell more of their games, like more copies at like PAXs and everything. That's awesome. But if you want to get something that was made years ago, like, oh, I want to get into River City Girls, okay, I'll get a physical copy. Oh, geez, yikes. Or Shantae, like me. Like, I have almost every Shantae game except Pirate's Curse, and that's why. Because they're limited run, they go out of print quicker than a lot of modern AAA releases, and because of that, it's just frustrating. And then you got stuff like Fangamer, where it's like, oh, cool, we got Hollow Knight, Celeste, and Undertale easily like 35 bucks, get it online, get it at Best Buy or GameStop. Yeah, this is good, this is nice. Like, why doesn't Limited Run do that? You know, I don't fully hate them or anything, but they make me feel like physical games is slowly being pushed towards a niche, like vinyls, where it's like, they're only for a dedicated audience, and I don't want that. In my opinion, especially for the future of game preservation, we need physical games and digital games to coexist as much as possible.
What is it about the box art and why you prefer like physical games and stuff like that?
Honestly, it gives me this strange sense of euphoria to just put on like a shelf and put them in like alphabetical order or whatever order you so choose, but to put them there and also they just look like books. They just look really nice, look really neat, and it's just aesthetically pleasing to me. But also some game boxes like Splatoon 2 and 3, they have the alternate art where you can like slip it out of the box, like slip the paper out of the box, turn it around, and it's a completely different cover. And I just thought that was really cool.
Without their efforts on the PlayStation Vita all the way back in 2015, who knows what physical indie games would be like today if they would exist at all. One of the most popular and biggest series that Limited Run Games makes physical copies of is Shantae, a 2D platformer where you play as the titular belly dancer and transform into different animal creatures to traverse a tropical world with cool powers. This indie series has been a fan favorite for over 20 years, with entries going all the way back on the Game Boy Color. Thanks to Limited Run publishing and releasing the first 2 games on our platforms, all of them are now easily available to play, except for one. Limited Run Games and WayForward, they're taking the original second Shantae game, which is going to be on the Game Boy Advance, and they're putting it on the Game Boy Advance in a physical form next year. They recently announced that, and it's crazy to think about.
A GBA game in 2023.
Yeah, it's
damn, that is
crazy.
crazy.
Yeah, I wonder if we're gonna see more stuff like that, especially like even though like it's like there's a lot of more people that play on Switch and Xbox and PlayStation, stuff like that. Like you still have this audience that is interested in like, I'm collecting for the systems. It would be cool to like have something new to like look out for that is like affordable for the systems.
As far as I know, like, if there's a chance that a game will run on a system, then you should try porting it to that, but also, like, the companies are going to think, okay, are enough people even going to buy this to warrant the cost of it?
What does the future of game preservation look like, you may ask? Well, not looking too good. Now, let's take, like, Just Dance 2023. Okay, it's pretty cool. Oh my goodness! It's digital only, even in the physical case? You see these little like digital only like physical boxes? I can understand, okay, Fortnite, yeah, whatever, but a Just Dance, like a AAA Ubisoft title is getting like a digital only physical case. Like, let's say their parent gets it for their kid and it's like, where's the cartridge? Put in the code, or what if they lose the slip? Or it's just like, it's so frustrating, and I really hope this doesn't become the new trend in the future. And what's even worse is you got like Microsoft trying to push for an all cloud future.
It's $9.99 a month. What? It's weirdly challenging to convince people they can get over 100 games.
And on like movie streaming or anime streaming and music, okay, that's understandable. I feel like personally I've gotten mostly over that. I can't with games, and here's why.
There are 2 sides to physical copies. Like, on one side there's like, you have the game, you own it. Awful reminder, when you buy a game digitally, you're not buying it, you are technically renting it. You are, I don't know, renting might be a bit of a strong word, but you're buying a license that can be revoked at any time, which has happened a couple times in recent memory. Granted, a couple out of like a couple 100,000 isn't too bad, but like, it's absolutely horrible to know that's looming over your head. So it's cool to actually have the game and know that no one can ever take it from you. As we push more and more into not only games that are like constantly updated, but like games that don't release ready. Even with like, say a game is ready when it releases, you don't know if the game on disc is fine, because like, if it's good day one, there's a difference between good day one and good on the disc, as we know how going gold and day one updates work. So like, if it's not good, and then say you like don't have an internet connection, so you like live in the woods or something, then that physical copy isn't, I mean, it's something, but it kind of, that whole thing kind of devalues the worth of physical games, which kind of sucks.
Every game launcher known to man is in a constant state of updating. Why the hell are you gonna sell a game on Steam if it's just gonna require me to sign into another launcher or stupid DRM anyways? What the fuck is the point of buying it on Steam?
There's a reason why Stadia failed and recently just shut down and everything. If you release a game on a platform you can only stream it to and you can't physically buy a game of it or have it like a digital copy of it that's like on your system forever, like on the Wii U and 3DS and the Wii, you lose that game just forever. All the hard work made by all those developers into your otherwise just like all these like cool graphics and gameplay, it's gone.
In recent memory, we had like films and TV shows that were made for streaming services. So they were made to premiere on a streaming service and they may have never had a physical release. Getting removed from those streaming services because the companies just don't want to write residual checks to the people who made those movies. That's awful. That's like we're going back downhill. We were getting pretty good and now we're going downhill again.
And I can understand, okay, from a cost and accessibility standpoint, Nintendo Switch Online Game Pass, that's great. It's like, oh wow, I pay, you know, like X price, you know, a month or a year or whatever. That's not bad. You know, I get to play whatever games I want. They're on it. Oh wait, this game's gone. Like Netflix. And so that means if this starts happening and if your only means of playing games or this game in particular, then you're crap out of luck. And it's even more difficult for games when they're at a higher price in the secondhand market. So one thing I'm really hoping more companies start doing is complete editions. What I love about the NetherRealm Studios fighting games, Mortal Kombat, Injustice, whatever, they always do a complete edition. This is all the DLC, cheap price, a couple years later, done. It's done, right? You don't see that with Smash Bros. Ultimate. You don't see that with like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. If they don't get ported on Switch 2 with all the DLC, or at the minimum the DLC's not on the eShop, that means, again, when the Switch eShop closes, those are going to be incomplete experiences, especially when, in my opinion, some of the best fighters in that game are just gone. Like, look at what happened with Smash 4. If you want to, like, preserve Smash 4, you can't anymore because those downloadable characters are gone. Hopefully, Mortal Kombat 1 does the same thing a few years down the road when that comes out later this year. Fingers crossed. And what about games as a service games like Fortnite or Minecraft or Overwatch? You know, they're awesome. They add all these characters, you know, cool IPs. I love them. But here's the problem. They're so bad for preservation because unless if you're like Minecraft and you're able to easily download the older versions and they're archived like it's like an old Unity program, that means like that experience when you get that version 1.0 of the game, because they're so dependent on online features, they're going to be gone, and it's really heartbreaking. When Overwatch 2 came out last year, they just completely delisted the original, even with the physical release, because, oh, it's like mainly online, so it's like, there's no single player content, nothing. You have like a useless disc now.
Overwatch 2, it's just an update to the original Overwatch.
But still, that's what I'm talking about with like Fortnite and stuff like that in Minecraft. It's like because it's like so drastically different, like you can't revert back because it's an update. Like in a way that original game isn't being preserved at all, it's just being replaced. The only way you can like relive that 1.0 experience of Fortnite is YouTube videos, and YouTube videos can't replace the experience of playing an interactive game. Yes, you can see a video of PT playable teaser from years ago, but you can't play it anymore. Now, the one thing I've noticed about gaming is, especially compared to other forms of media, they still have a strong physical presence, especially in retailers like Best Buy or Target or GameStop, especially because of the higher price tag. Like, if you think about it, they can be considered as like a premium, and also, I feel like it's more worth it having it physical. It's a memory of the experience. They're interactive. Your actions affect the outcome and change the experience and story that is told in the world you play. No two playthroughs of certain games like Persona is going to be the same, depending on the route you take.
If you didn't know, before like DVDs came out and before VHS, that was a problem for movies too. Like, before VHS was a thing, a movie comes out in theaters, and if you don't see it then, gone forever. When a movie's in the theater, that's your one chance to see it. But eventually that started happening, and then movies went to VHS, and you started having old movies finally. I've heard a lot of people say that if you compare movies to games, we're still in like the black and white. Games are kind of still getting started. Which kind of makes sense because, like, look at when VHSs came out compared to when movies started. That's like an 80-year difference, basically, to finally get to that, like, oh, this movie preservation is kind of solved now. Not 100% solved, but solved compared to what it was before. So, like, movies still, most certainly still have problems in terms of preservation, but we're leaps and bounds ahead of what elements, which is very unfortunate.
Now, if you listen to like music or read a book or movies, they're fixed. You know, you watch it, they're passive. Video games are active. And that's why I feel like game preservation is so difficult. And that's why I'm sad. I feel like they're not, the companies aren't taking the right path nowadays. There's so many moving parts in terms of how to preserve a game, as I mentioned earlier, like the context, the controllers, the hardware. There's so many things that can go wrong. So hopefully, one thing that companies can keep in mind is like, old hardware is going to fail. PlayStation 1 discs rot. Game Boy and NES batteries die. Old hardware and systems fail. And so if those games don't get ported, if their only means of being there is physical on the other end of the spectrum of digital-only games, then that's even worse. Now, with that in mind, we have to talk about the threat in the room. Now, I saved this for last because, oh my goodness, it is a doozy. I'm no means an expert. The legality of emulation is some messed up gray area that I really don't know much about. A lot of people made videos, but the point is like, I want to specifically talk about the non-developer emulators like Dolphin and Project 64, Citra, Visual Boy Advance, and stuff like that. Now, I think we should definitely like keep emulation. I think it's fine. You know, I don't prefer it. It's okay, you know, if I want to play a mod, you know, of like Smash or whatever, like Smash Bros. Brawl, cool. I think it's fine. But for a lot of people, like, emulating is one of, if not their only options for playing games.
If the company that made something is not giving you a legal route to acquire it, like they're not selling it to you, they're not streaming it, pirate it. If the only option to get something is like buying a copy of it on eBay, or maybe nothing like that, if it's like a streaming movie, pirate it. There's no reason you should not pirate something that the company isn't even giving you the option to buy. So abandonware is like software that a company isn't selling anymore, but also isn't issuing takedown notices for. So there's a lot of games on Steam, or like a lot of PC games that just can't be sold anymore. A lot of times it's because like licenses, they can't sell it because of like the licenses went out of date, and like if that happens, it's kind of bound to happen, so that's at least a reasonable reason to not sell it. Back when I first got my PC, I was looking into games to get, and a little bit after that, I like looked for a copy of Deadpool on G2A, and it was $20, but it was one of like 3 copies left, so I bought that. Yeah, I just kind of hopped on it with that one, and it's not available anymore, just like right after that. And if they're not issuing takedowns for it, then it's considered abandonware, where it's just kind of completely legal to just download it. Like, I've downloaded a bunch of old games. Like, I got most of the old Harry Potter games through not torrenting, just sites that just have it up because they're considered abandonware. And I talked to my father about that, who's a lawyer, and I was like, okay, why issue takedowns for something if you're not selling it? And he said the only real reason is like if you want to possibly make profit off it in the future, which makes sense, but outside of that, Nintendo, I believe, is like pretty much an outlier in terms of abandonware. Like most other companies I can think of, if they don't sell something, it becomes abandonware, but with Nintendo, they still issue takedowns for their old stuff that they don't sell. It is so baffling to me that there are people who want to buy something, but the company just says no. You'd think that in the society we live in like our economy, that just wouldn't happen. It's like if I wrote that into like a science fiction novel, people would tell me it was unrealistic, but no, that's what's happening.
Now the weird thing is, if AAA companies and some indies use emulators to port their own games, like the infamous Mario 3D All-Stars or Mega Man Legacy Collection, stuff like that, then why can't we? Why can't I use Dolphin to back up my childhood games in case of my Wii dies and I don't feel like replacing it and they don't get ported on newer consoles? Now, I'm not suggesting to stop buying games and fully use Dolphin or Yuzu or whatever the new Switch emulator is and buy like Pikmin 4 in there. No, I think developers should be supported. You should pay them. You should pay for the games you want and stuff like that. Emulators and games need to coexist for preservation. If one isn't there, it's going to collapse.
I would like to ask people higher ups at Nintendo or PlayStation, just be like, hey, how do you feel about the fact that if it wasn't for piracy, these games would be dead? They would be non-existent. People could not play these other than acquiring copies on eBay.
It's really infuriating more than anything because I had played, like you said, I had played the remakes and I said, oh, this is cool. I want to play Pokemon Emerald, so I get the whole shebang in one package. I get Rayquaza, etc., etc. And I had to scour for years, gaming stores, those retro gaming stores, nothing. And if I did find it, it was extremely overpriced or just out of my budget. And I said, I can't reasonably purchase this. And I thought, oh, maybe since Nintendo, they have their virtual console, they had Game Boy Advance games on the Wii U, so I thought, oh, maybe they're on the Wii U since the 3DS had both Generation 1 and Generation 2, like Red, Blue, Yellow, Gold, Silver, Crystal. I thought, oh, hey, they must have it on the Wii U. No, they don't have the Pokemon mainline games for Hoenn for some reason on the Wii U. So I thought, maybe it's on the Switch. No, it's not there either. It's just baffling to me for some reason why these specifically mainline games just aren't anywhere on the virtual console.
I'd like to ask them, what do you think of this and how does that make you feel? Because that's the truth. If it wasn't for piracy, which I feel like is a very good backbone right now in terms of game preservation, other than Nintendo issuing takedowns, and honestly, knowing how the piracy scene works, you can't kill that. You're not going to make it go away. I feel like that's what's keeping game preservation afloat. If it wasn't for piracy, we would be in a radically different world in terms of game preservation. Not just such a different world, but it's like the only thing that's keeping so many games alive. Both that and emulators. Even if you, not as 100% emulators, because if you, there are ways to pirate games and play those pirated copies on the original hardware. It's great and it also sucks. It's great, but it sucks to just know that without this, a lot of games would be just lost to time.
And so, of course, as I mentioned earlier, hardware fails, stuff happens, so emulation is necessary for backups. That's why Atari 50 used emulation to emulate the games the best we can. And even with an emulator, not all emulators are made the same. You gotta, really make sure you get that feel down to work with a modern controller. Games like Skyward Sword, when they put it on Switch, they had to rework it to work with the Switch's gyro controls instead of the Wii's and add traditional. And it's more than just take the files, copy and paste onto the Switch from the GameCube, for example. It takes a lot of extra work. You gotta scale the UI and stuff like that. And that's why not every game gets lucky to be remade, remastered, ported, whatever, is because a lot of companies aren't willing to put in that extra work, and it's just heartbreaking. Now, you may be thinking, oh, this isn't looking too good. Game preservation seems all but bleak, don't you think? Yeah, but there is hope, my friend. You may be wondering, why should I listen to just some random average game collector who barely has any games compared to the popular YouTubers I watch who have massive collections of games? Why does it care? Well, because I've done it myself. When I was at college and everything, I decided, you know what, I can't let these games I made just be icons on a screen. I was a developer, and I still am. I want to keep the stepping stones that led me to the path I am today in a physical form forever. So I made custom game covers, front, spine, back, for some of the games I made. And, you know, like through these, it just makes me realize it's just like, yeah, there's no flash drive or cartridge or any actual like way to access these games, but it's more than enough to me. It's a memento. It's a physical reminder that these games are more than just memories, but they're experiences. My first game I ever made was lost to time, like many millions of other games that might have had the same fate. It was a simple Google Drive link, gone, can't be accessed. And that's why, ever since then, I've realized game preservation is so important. If a website goes down, if a Google Drive link fails, if a website goes offline, like, if you don't properly back up stuff, like Square Enix almost couldn't put Final Fantasy VIII, a mainline Final Fantasy title, on newer platforms because they lost the source code apparently. I may just be like an average video game player, mediocre game collector, only 200, whatever, but like at the end of the day, I want to do what I can with preservation, no matter how small the collection is.
Even if you made a game like 10 years ago and you're like, maybe you're not really proud of it, or like maybe there's a bug or whatever that you might want to fix in the future, whatever, don't take it down. Don't destroy it just because you don't like it, because maybe somebody else really likes it out there instead.
So if you're a developer yourself, or if you have something you want to archive, whether if it's like movies or art, painting, journaling, books, I encourage you, archive it the best you can, because if you lose it, and if it's digital, it's gone. You can't bring it back. In the year 2023, we have to fight harder than ever before to preserve video game history and games themselves and make sure that their legacies are maintained throughout time and decades and centuries and all that stuff. This medium changed my life, and I'm sure it has for you too, and millions of other people. And you're telling me that we can preserve movies like this, like I described earlier, but not video games? Like, I don't understand that. I can't let my favorite games that shaped who I am today be inaccessible or disappear. I don't want Persona 5 to be unplayable 10, 20, 30 years from now. Now, you may be asking, how can I help? How can I help preserve video games and make sure their legacies are better?
Demand it. Just keep asking, keep yelling about it, keep making a big noise about it until it happens. Make it heard that people want to be able to play these games.
Legally speaking, I would say probably put more pressure on gaming companies to continue to preserve their physical games. Like, for example, we could get on Game Freak and Nintendo's butts and tell them, like, hey, you neglected to give us Generation 3, you neglected to, or like just Nintendo in general, you neglected to give us like these great games, you neglected this, put it on the virtual console. Just don't stop until they do it. Well, don't get too crazy, but you know what I mean.
Look at like what PlayStation is doing right now with their games on PC. They started doing that because they looked at the boatload of money that Microsoft was making when they put Halo on PC. So they did like one game and they did another, and now they're doing like pretty much everything that they have. And I feel like with game preservation, it would be a snowball effect with that too. Like if Nintendo was to make an emulator for the Switch that runs like SNES games, just have every SNES game like work on the Switch, and then they could sell all of those by themselves, and I feel like they'd make a lot of money off of that. And as I said, I think it would be a domino effect. Like they would see like how much money they're making off of selling their old games and be like, oh, there's really a market for this. As much as we can like yell about it.
In 20 years, we talked about this, like a lot of these Nintendo developers, some of them have started to pass away.
Yeah.
Or a lot of a big generation is going to retire in the next 20 years, and who knows like where they're going to go? Are they going to be accessible? We're close to that precipice where a lot of that history starts to get very into the ether. Mm-hmm. But it's like a lot of topics. It's like, well, I can't think about that because I need to focus on the now. I need to worry about now.
And the only way we can do that is spread the word. The only way we can do that is properly archive and document and talk about this stuff. The internet is a great place, yes. There's millions of YouTube videos about hidden gems, and a lot of games are seeing the light of day and their legacies are being maintained. But I'm sorry, it's not enough. The game companies have to step up. And now I'm speaking to you, the viewer, the game developer, the company, whoever's watching.
Now, it's your turn.